I'd like to welcome everyone to the June 10th, 2015 meeting of the City of Brentwood Planning and Zoning Commission. If you'll please join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
John Nuremberg is here. Michael Daming.
Here.
Sherry Bilderbach.
Here.
Dan Glowski.
Here.
Jennifer Hansen.
Here.
David Dimmitt.
Here.
We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Nuremberger. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the May 13th, 2015 meeting. Has everybody had an opportunity to review those minutes? Are there any revisions? Seeing none, they'll stand as presented. First item under old business is a petition for site plan approval for a building addition at 2555 Hermelin. Petitioner is Burns and McDonald. Is the petitioner here? Will you please step forward, ma'am? Introduce yourself, your role with the petition. And we've taken up your old business item before, so after you introduce yourself, if you could review the changes and what's taken place since our last meeting.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. My name's Sherry Cloth-Flayha. I'm going to be the construction project manager for this project. We met before on April 8th, and since that meeting, we did take some of your advice, and we made some changes to the plan, and you should have the latest plan in your packets. The most obvious is the chiller. If you recall, back on April 8th, it was located behind the existing building and between the existing building and the creek. So we have moved it to the west side of the modular building. And as you can recall, this new structure sits in a floodplain. So the modular building is elevated, the chiller is going to be elevated, and the emergency diesel generator will also be elevated on steel platforms. Get you a drawing number here for the new chiller that best shows. If you look at drawing 0101104, the 7th document in your packet.
What's the number again?
0101104. It's like the 7th page. You see there's a proposed modular building with the corridor that connects to the existing building. Then on the west side, you will see the outline of the chiller pad and the emergency generator pad. You will also notice that this plan has the grading removed. This was sitting on right now it's currently an asphalt parking lot. And the asphalt is being removed. We're replacing it with gravel and grass because of the 50-foot barrier setback with the creek. And we met May 28th with the Board of Adjustment and ran that past them and got their approval. So that, I think, is the biggest changes.
Okay, well, very good. And one of the primary changes was, well, one of the primary concerns was sound being generated by the site. Tell you what, Mr. Wise, would you mind just giving a staff report and,
Sure.
and indicate what the city did in that regard?
If you don't mind, I'll kind of address the stream buffer issue first. Around the first meeting, we found the flood study didn't take the required stream buffer requirement into account for this property. So we worked with the applicant. They made an application to the Board of Adjustment requesting a variance from that standard. And as part of the approval for that, basically what the board approved was that the current, I think it's 7,000 square feet of asphalt in that area had to be removed and replaced with something that would allow water to naturally infiltrate so that the area still, one, it complies with the intent of the ordinance, and two, is an improvement over the existing conditions on the site today. So that's why they've modified the plan to show those changes on it. Of course, they've gone with more of a gravel under the building where sunlight would be an issue, where grass likely wouldn't grow anyways, and then grass along the perimeter of that. The other issue, as you alluded to, was the sound issue. We had talked, I think, a fairly decent discussion at the last meeting on this project with the size and the intensity of the use, making sure that the property complied with the city's noise regulations. So we reached out to our on-call, one of our on-call engineers, McClure Engineering, and they created a model of the site with all the information for all of the proposed as well as the existing units on the site to ensure compliance. That led to moving the chiller to one location as well. You'll see in the report from McClure Engineering, you'll see reference to a change in the chiller type to a quieter unit than was originally proposed. If you immediately behind the cover page in the plan, there's two 8.5 by 11s stapled in there, and that includes some of the information that they're proposing for the quieter hush core chiller to be used to ensure compliance with the city's noise ordinance itself. And we do have Emil here from McClure Engineering, who, if you'd like to hear from him, I'm sure he could give you an overview of the process he went through and his findings as well. But I think the conclusion of it was, with the changes that are shown on here, the property is in compliance with the city's noise regulations.
Okay, very good. And this revised site plan does reflect the addition of this hush core?
That is correct.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, very good. I appreciate that. Why don't we open it up to questions from commissioners? Mr. Demmett?
I have some questions for the, excuse me, the sound engineer.
Mr. Demott, can you please step forward? Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Good evening, sir. How are you?
Good evening. My name is Emil Demott. I'm with the senior design, acoustical consultant with McClure Engineering.
Okay. On your study, you have indicated 3 points.
Yes.
How are those selected?
They're selected based on being close to either a group of sound sources in the project or a major sound source, such that those points of interest would be likely the highest sound level along the property line. So there are 3 locations that could have a high sound level, and each of those were calculated as part of the report that I provided.
Now, is that based upon visual observations? Is that how you determined that those 3 would most likely be the greatest contributor of sound?
Well, they're basically a line perpendicular to either the group of sources or in this case, the new chiller was a major player here. And so 2 of the locations are perpendicular to the side of the chiller at the property line on the creek side of the chiller and also on what I thought was the north side. I've heard her describe it as the west side, but I think it's the north side based on their drawing showing north in that direction. So those 2 locations are driven by the chiller. The other location was sort of a central location from the 5 air handling units on top of the building,
Okay.
which then, in addition to those 5, picks up a contribution from both chillers, the old one and the new one, and the appropriate attenuation that the building itself provides.
Okay.
Because the building blocks the line of sight from the units on top of the roof, on some of the units on top of the roof, to the location that would be measured at the property line.
That was actually my follow-up question. Page 3 of your report states, building addition breaks the line of sight between many of the sources in the measurement location and provides a partial sound barrier to the sound. If you could explain that to me, because my understanding is that you're going to have these 5 cooling units on top of the structure.
Yes.
So how does the building then break the line of sight?
Well, the edge of the building, which is close to the creek in this case, breaks the line of sight from the units that set further back on the roof There is one unit, I think it's unit number 4, and it shows 0 attenuation from the building because the building doesn't break the line of sight. You can see that unit from
Okay.
the location that would be measured there on the property line, which basically is in a central, is in the center of Black Creek, 4 feet off of the ground there is the location that would be where you would measure based on your code.
And so Unit 3, the fact that there is no breakage in the line of sight, that was taken into consideration when you were calculating the decibel?
Yes, number 4 is the one that has no breakage of the line of sight.
Okay.
And the new chiller, of course, wouldn't either because now it's beyond the building addition. So it has a straight line of sight to the measurement location.
But
all
those were all,
three
that was all taken into consideration?
Yes, it was. And these calculations are based on how far away the unit is, how much the building breaks the line of sight. So the sound is going over the edge of the building. The maximum attenuation that a building of this type could provide is 20 dB. But when there's partial breakage, then the number drops below 20, and that's
Okay.
what's calculated in the report.
Okay. And I noticed that there's a space for a generator on site. I think the applicant referred to it as an emergency generator. Was that taken into consideration at all?
It was not because of its nature, the fact that it's a standby unit would only come on in case of a emergency situation. So that puts it in a different category relative to your code. So it wasn't included in these calculations.
What do you mean, puts it in a different category?
Well, because it's a standby unit, not one that runs in normal sequence, then it's not something that would be running day and night as everything else on this project would be.
When it is running, under those, in those instances where it would be running, would the noise from that contribute to
The noise from
decibels?
the unit would contribute. The problem is the time that it's going to be running. Your code, there's one level in the code. If it's below that level, it can run continuously and not be a problem. If it's above that number, it can still be okay as long as it doesn't run very much. So it's a matter of percentage of time. So since it's almost impossible to project how much would that unit be running.
Right.
You can't go through a calculation and determine whether it meets the code or doesn't meet the code. Your code has about, I think, 6 or 7 levels that are depending on the length of time, the percent of time that the thing runs. And in this case, we couldn't run through a calculation because there's no way to know how long that unit would be running.
Okay.
I assume that it would be something that would come on when the main power fails and would be only there during a weather outage of some type.
And the opinions that you've expressed in your report relative to the 3 points, those opinions all are within a reasonable degree of engineering certainty?
Good question. The uncertainty of this kind of analysis is similar to experimental data that you might take on site. So we're talking about plus or minus 1.5 dB is the range of certainty on those kind of numbers.
Thank you. That's all I have.
And just to follow up on Mr. Dimmitt's line of questioning, Mr. Wise, to the extent Mr. DeMott's speculation as to what's going to be created in terms of decibel level by this applicant exceeds these levels in the code, the applicant would be guilty of a nuisance, correct?
That is correct.
And to the extent the generator was activated and ran on a much more frequent basis than we're considering at this point, and those levels again exceeded the city's decibel levels, the applicant would be guilty of a nuisance.
That is correct.
Very good. Other questions, Mr. Nuremberg?
And correct me if I'm wrong, there's no current complaints from any neighbors of the current operation of the site?
That is correct.
I had a couple of questions for the applicant as well.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. DeMott.
I just wanted to clarify one other point, is that 2 of these locations are up against a residential area, so those are lower numbers in your code. The one on the north side would be a commercial number, so it would be up against a commercial number in your code.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you for your
Thank you.
report.
First thing, did we have a site plan meeting for this applicant or not?
Mr. Wise?
We'd originally discussed having one if the noise study was done in time. But then the noise study, I hadn't got it ready yet.
Okay.
And then we addressed the issue with the Board of Adjustment. So the answer is no.
Okay. I don't know if that's something that we're going to call for or not, but I had some question about your operation of the plant itself or whatever. I think the addition of the site is adequate. I'm sure it's what you need, but I have some question about some of the notes on your map, the one that's 101000102. You have some of that cage, vault, growing room, equipment, airlock, formulation, sterile cool down. Can you give us an overall what you actually do inside that facility? And is there any cause for any alarm about what you're doing in this facility?
What the facility is a CGMP pharmaceutical manufacturing company. They basically make EpiPens. We have 2 Meridian gentlemen here in the audience.
Okay. So they make EpiPens for
the public.
For the public?
Yep.
Okay. The reason I asked, there's been rumors, there's more rumors than anything else in Brentwood, and some people have heard that there's some military association with the chemical, and some of the people that were in Iraq or whatever were using like for, what do you call it? If they get gas poisoning or whatever, they have to use a pin or whatever, that sort of thing. Is there anything that would be dangerous? I guess I'm trying to find out if there's anything going on that we have to be worried about.
I mean, all I can say is they have to follow the FDA regulations, and they have to operate in that manner. So I don't know if, Kevin, you want to come up and speak to this?
I'm Kevin Bordelman. I'm a manager of project engineering. We make antidote or pharmaceutical products for nerve agents and that kind of stuff. So if someone's exposed to it, it's all pharmaceutical products is what it is.
Right. So if they're doing it for nerve agents or whatever, is there any of the nerve agents are there that being tested in that facility?
No, there's there's no testing. It's just manufacture of pharmaceutical products.
Okay. Is there anything dangerous or anything like that that would be, I guess you've been here, how long? You've been doing this for how
Pharmaceutical
long?
or?
Yeah. In Brentwood. How long? have
I've
you
been here since 2004.
Okay. And the plant has been there longer than that,
I
hasn't
think
it?
1971.
Okay, so they've been doing it for a long time in that location. So I think that really clears my mind. So thank you very much.
Other questions from commissioners? Ms. Bilderbeck?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Really more so an observation. I'm really happy with the sound study and the changes that have been made. I think it's great. I mean, the study was just incredible. The gentleman clearly knows his work. And generally, the changes that have been made since the last time that we met and discussed this, I'm just very pleased with. So that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any member of the audience like to address the commission on this application? Any further discussion among commissioners? Ms. Bilderbeck?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to approve this plan as submitted to recommend that to the Board of Aldermen.
Second.
Roll call, please.
John Nermer is yes. Jerry Bilderback,
Yes.
Jane Glasky,
Yes.
Jennifer Hansen.
Yes.
David Devitt.
Yes.
Motion passes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Wise, next step for this applicant?
We will get them ready for the Board of Aldermen for final approval.
Very good. Next item under old business is a petition for site plan approval for building modifications at 2605 South Brentwood Boulevard. Is the petitioner present? Will you please step forward, introduce yourself? The commission will recall we took this application up at the last regular meeting as well as the last site plan meeting. So after you introduce yourself, if you could please review the changes that have been made to your site plan since the last regular meeting for the benefit of the audience.
My name's John Rodriguez. I'm with Mesa Design Build, the architect for the project. In the last meeting, there was a, there was a request to increase the planters at the front of the building that kind of define the entry and the ramp. There was a request to add a landscape bed along Brentwood, South Brentwood Boulevard, similar to the one across Madge with mulch and some plantings. There was a request of resealing the parking lot and restriping. And final one was to remove the storage shed at the western part of the site. We've completed all of those. We're adding the landscape beds. We've enlarged the planters in front. We plan to restripe and reseal the parking lot and remove the shed.
I think that's accurate. Mr. Wise, do you agree?
I would agree, and as you mentioned, it was taken up at the last site plan meeting. At that time, the subcommittee made a unanimous recommendation to the full Planning and Zoning Commission for approval with the changes made by the applicant.
Very good. Questions from commissioners? Any member of the audience like to? Yes, sir. Do you have something to say?
Yes, my name's Chuck Hodge. I own the building, and we've been working with Apex since December, trying to come up with an appropriate plan that would work for them and be acceptable to P&Z and to the city of Brentwood. And we're requesting that if you should give us approval to go ahead with this, that possibly you would consider combining both the first and the second reading at the Board of Aldermen. And the reason that we're requesting this, we would save a month. A lot of the work that needs to be done on this project needs to be done when the weather is good and we don't get pushed off into colder weather. Much of the project that I'm going to be doing as the owner of the building, I can't do until my tenant gets part of their process doing. We're going to illuminize the roof. We're going to do a lot of shrubbery work and planting and that kind of thing. So we would appreciate your consideration for that. Thank you.
Okay. Move on to take that into consideration. But Mr. Hodge and Mr. Rodriguez, we do appreciate your consideration of the recommendations that this commission made. Any member of the audience like to address the commission on this application? Any further discussion?
I'll make a motion that we approve and both first and second readings at the Board of Aldermen for this to go forward.
Second.
Roll call, please.
David Dibbett,
Yes.
Jennifer Hansen,
Yes.
Dan Glowski,
Yes.
Sherry Bilderback,
Yes.
John Nember is yes. Motion passes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hodge, Mr. Rodriguez. Next item under old business is a petition for site plan approval to add additional parking at 8837 and 8839 Manchester. Is petitioner Noble Capital here? Please step forward, gentlemen. Introduce yourselves again to the commission.
My name's Greg Iverson.
And I'm Charlie Winkler.
Okay, gentlemen, we took this application up at the May regular meeting and at the May site plan meeting, and my understanding is that you too paid heed to many of the recommendations that the commission made, and we appreciate that. If you could generally provide a brief overview of what you've done to your application since our May regular meeting in these chambers.
We have provided drawings and site plan for the retaining wall that we plan to construct in the back behind the parking lot that we are building. We have talked about the drainage situations that come from putting the parking lot in, and we've also talked about the plants and the type of shrubbery that is going to go in between the retaining wall and the buffer zone between the residential behind us, and also the planting that is going to be visible from Manchester Road.
Okay, Mr. Wise, staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think one of the important things that came out of the initial meeting was there was one of the property owners that is directly north of the subject site that had come to the initial meeting before the Planning and Zoning Commission and had expressed some, at least preliminary concerns. The applicant did reach out to the property owner and made contact with her, kind of walked her through exactly what they were looking to do on the site. She did come to the May Planning and Zoning Subcommittee meeting, and at that meeting, it was my understanding that she had said that she was satisfied with all of the changes and with the proposal. So I believe that they've adequately addressed that issue. As the applicants noted, they also provided two of the exhibits, one showing the existing landscape planter along the front of the building and how they intend to add some landscaping to that, as well as the retaining wall along the rear of the property with the plantings along there. One of the ideas that was discussed was instead of simply taking the water that would come down through that retaining wall and having drains in the retaining wall that would essentially then sheet flow over the parking lot down on the Manchester Road, trying to direct that water to the green space area kind of on the northeast side of the site. The applicant has expressed that they're willing to do that change. Essentially, instead of daylighting those in individual openings along the wall, that they would run a pipe down perpendicular to the wall and have it daylight within the green space area to at least give it an opportunity to naturally infiltrate into that area. And then any additional overflow runoff in that area would then make its way south from there, but it allows the opportunity for natural infiltration.
Okay, and that was an additional revision over and above what had been presented at the site plan subcommittee meeting, correct?
Yes, right.
All right, well, we appreciate you taking that into consideration as well.
And with the changes or with the clarifications on the landscaping, and as well as the clarifications from the existing property owner, the subcommittee did unanimously recommend approval of the project.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wise. Questions from commissioners? Ms. Bilderback?
Not a question. I just wanted to make an observation and thank the applicant for taking the time to talk to the other property owner. That's greatly appreciated. We know that that takes extra time, and I think it will serve you well, and obviously has been a great service to that person, and I thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Yep. Mr. Nurnberger?
I was not able to attend the subcommittee. I was late. I showed up at 7 o'clock instead of 6. But there was a couple of questions I'm going to ask is trucks that you're going to have parked in the back lot, where are they going to be located? Are they going to be located furthest from the residential, or how's that?
They'll be located behind the 8837 building, which there are some side lots here. If you guys have a copy of the overall site plan, there's two spots directly behind 8837, which would be the farthest or the eastern building. We're going to park our trailers when they are there behind there, just so they're not visible from Manchester Road.
Right.
Also, the trucks will be parked. The trucks that we use, which is only one for business at this point, and it's just a Ford F-250. It's not a diesel. It's not a loud truck.
Right.
It's just a gasoline running vehicle. Will be parked on the west side of the 8839 building.
I guess I'm trying to say if it's going to be parked there anytime overnight, it should be parked furthest from the residential area as possible. That's what I'm, yeah.
It will be, yeah. We'll have those hidden both from Manchester, but also as far as they can be
I
from
think the
from
one
residential.
person that was here kind of said something about being 12 foot from our bedroom or something like that. I just want to make sure if it can be on the other end, that's better than.
They'll be as far as they can from her.
And the other question I was going to ask is it going to be one lot, or is it dividable, or in the future, if you wanted to sell one side of the lot, is that possible?
It is possible. Currently, there are two separate parcels. We own both of them. They're used in conjunction with each other. So at this point, we certainly don't
intend to. It might be
to.
more of a question for Justin. This is one site plan, and we're approving one site plan. If they want to sell the property, will they have to come back through us to sell, or do anything?
It wouldn't have to come back through you all to sell it, unless it required a conditional use permit, unless they were looking to make modifications to it. If they were looking to make modifications so for instance, if they sold off the eastern parcel and kept the western, and the eastern parcel wanted to make changes to their site, it would be part of the review that it would be taken into consideration, the impact that the plan that's shown before you this evening, that how it operates as one site plan approval.
So they would have to get a conditional use for selling it, and then a new owner would have to come back for a use permit to us.
If the code required, depending on the use of the property. So if it's a permitted use in the code, then they wouldn't have to come back and get a conditional use
I
permit.
guess I'm just worried about common driveway, whatever, and when you sell one property,
I understand the concern.
because there's only one drive-through, right?
There's actually one on the west side of 8839 as well. I think it's about, is it 20 feet back there? Do you remember?
Not sure of the exact size.
I think if I were to, I don't have any concerns about our future ability to regulate the property and provide adequate access or safe circulation if they were to sell off part of the
Oh, they would have to do an easement of some sort? Or,
Yeah, I mean, they could, and quite honestly, we have this all over the city as it exists currently right
Yeah.
now, especially along Manchester
I
Road.
guess more it's like taking two homes and just,
Right.
they're creating more of a business
Right.
atmosphere or whatever.
Exactly.
So, all right, that's all I had, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Any other commissioners? Anyone from the audience like to address the commission? Ms. Charbonneau? Please. Just for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Daming. Louise Charbonneau. Thank you to Mr. Iverson and Mr. Winkler for recognizing our concerns with regard to the runoff down to Manchester Road. And there's some type of a saying where when you do something good or do it right, you'll gratify your friends and confound your enemies. Well, you're on the road to confounding your enemies. And maybe Santa Claus will bring you a couple of rain garden plants to stick in.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the audience? If there's no further discussion amongst the commission, we'll entertain a motion.
Could I add one more thing?
Yes.
Could we also, similar to the last gentleman, in order to pave that parking lot, we need adequate weather as well. We'd like to ask that the first and second readings be combined for ours as well. Our goal is summer or fall to be able to pour the parking lot, so.
Mr. Klasky?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the site plan as submitted, along with the recommendation to the Board of Aldermen that the first and second readings be combined.
Second.
Roll call, please.
John Member is yes. Sherry Bilderbeck,
Yes.
Dan Glowski,
Yes.
Jennifer Hansen,
Yes.
David Dillon.
Yes.
Motion passes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and thank you, gentlemen.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for your considerations as well.
Appreciate it. Thank you very
Who
much.
was the second on that?
Mr. Wise?
Jennifer.
The sole item under new business is a petition for an amended site plan to allow outdoor seating at 1413 South Hanley. Is petitioner here? you step forward? If you could introduce yourself and your petition.
Okay, I'm Steve Geschke, the owner and manager at the Smoothie King. We are requesting for 2 tables and chairs in front of our store.
Okay, Mr. Wise, staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the applicant mentioned, the petitioner is Smoothie King. They're currently located within the Meridian development, which is zoned PD plan development. The overall site is 13.721 acres. They are, of course, a much smaller tenant within the larger overall site. The tenant frontage faces along Hanley Road, and they have requested that 2 outdoor tables be provided to allow their customers to grab a smoothie and sit outside and enjoy some very hot weather these days. The comprehensive plan calls for this project is a regional mixed-use area. I did include one kind of key element that I thought was pertinent to the application when it talks about providing walkable, pedestrian-oriented development and interconnections between commercial districts. I think that the proposal for outdoor seating along the area is, consistent with that idea of allowing those indoor spaces to come outdoors and allowing for those gathering places to occur. Staff's chief concern at the onset of it was ensuring that pedestrian access was not impeded along the existing walkway in front of the building along there. The existing walkway along there is more than sufficient. It's not your minimum width sidewalk, so having provisions for the outdoor seating is appropriate. In addition, the current tenant space, if you look at the street view image on page 3 of 4 of the staff report, the tenant space is kind of set in a little bit, so they have the additional several feet of where those columns are that kind of give them some additional room there. The final consideration, there is an existing fence as well as wheel stops in the parking lot to provide that physical separation from the pedestrian area and the vehicular area. So with that, staff had no other concerns, no concerns with the application.
Okay, very good. And that's right. And the primary concern would be interference with pedestrian circulation. And it sounds you're confident that's not going to be an issue?
Not at all. It's 15 feet wide. There's also a foot curb before the fence that blocks.
All right. I would suggest, just a suggestion that the commission take into consideration a condition on this application, just ensuring that there's not any pedestrian interference. But I don't have much of a concern, but we don't know how these things are going to play out. So that's just a consideration you may want to take in mind. Keep in mind. Questions from commissioners? Ms. Bilderbeck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regarding your proposal, I would have no problem with that. I would say that when these properties were originally put out way back for our FPs, that this is highly consistent with what we talked about. I actually think it's great. I love that you've taken consideration for the concerns like our chairman has outlined. I love that there's a fence there and the curbing and that it's adequately protected. And I think that it goes along with what we've been trying to do all along and the theme that we had discussed as we went forward with all of these RFPs and with the Meridian initially. So I like the proposal, actually. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further comments from commissioners? Mr. Nurnberger?
What kind of furniture are you talking about putting out there? Is it going to be wrought iron, heavy?
Wrought iron, small tables and chairs. I think they're 30 by 30.
Okay, I'm just not wanting to have the rattan facet ones that go blowing away or whatever, something like that. It's going to be a classy look and that sort of thing. That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else? Anybody from the audience want to address the commission on this? If there's no further discussion, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Ms. Bilderbeck.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to recommend approval to the Board of Aldermen of this application with the provision that, or condition that adequate pedestrian passage and walkway be provided at all times.
Second.
Further discussion? Roll call.
David Dimmitt,
Yes.
Jennifer Hansen,
Yes.
Dan Kowski,
Yes.
Sherry Bildobach,
Yes.
John Nermer is yes.
Okay, very good. Congratulations. Thank you. Okay, next item is the aldermanic report. I see no aldermen or women. City planners report. Mr. Wise?
No report.
Okay, no need for a subcommittee meeting. Rationale, Mr. Wise, you can handle.
Yes, sir.
Other business, we took up nominations at the last meeting. Mr. Wise, you want to walk everyone through what we're supposed to do tonight?
So tonight, I think we just need to find, we had the nominations at the last meeting. So get a formal motion on that.
Okay, I think we're supposed to open it up for new nominations as well.
Oh, yes, yeah, I'm sorry.
And then vote. Any further, and the nominations, my understanding is Michael Daming was nominated for chairman. Any further nominations for chairman? Okay, vice chairman, my understanding is David Dimmitt was nominated. Any further nominations? My understanding is that the nominee for secretary was Mr. Nuremberger. Any further nominations? Okay, any objection to these nominations being approved by acclamation? Seeing none, they'll stand as submitted. Any further other business?
Do we have to say aye?
No, it'd just be acclamation. Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries.